Welcome to the new podcast, In the Garden with Susan. I'm your host, Susan Ladner. I will aim to bring you top quality information on how to save open pollinated seeds, grow a garden, and preserve what you grow. Every Wednesday, I'll be sharing practical tips and techniques to help you on your journey to food security. Join me as I preserve the abundance of produce that my garden provides. Learn new ways of putting food away for the winter and some old ways that are from another century. You can find this podcast on Shopify and at my website. Come on, let's go wander down to the garden and awaken the dreams, history, and love that is held inside every seed. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of In the Garden with Susan. And this is like take 7 or 8. It's been the gong show today. I can't believe I've been trying to do this all day, and I actually did record an episode, and then luckily I just happened to check because I got cut off at the end to see where it got cut off. And the episode sounded like I was underwater and was breaking up in and out, and that's never happened before. So I tried to do another episode, and the goats have been coming up. My dog has been going crazy. A goat actually got into the garden. It's been very crazy here, and there's a tractor going by. One of the little goats got stuck inside a fence. The goats were like, the mother goat was just, screaming for her baby. And so every time I've tried to record, some total chaos has erupted. I'm hoping that we can get through this episode. I think I'm just going to plow through this at this time, so please excuse any sort of insanity that goes on. And I did try to record on OBS, and for some reason, it will not be accepted by Anchor FM. So here we are, and we're not even talking about the alliums. I'm going to get to that, and I'm going to finish that episode next week. But I wanted to talk about something that's really on my mind and that I'm thinking a lot about this weekend, and it is the weeds. Some of them are perennial, some of them are annuals or biennials. However, they do keep coming back every year, and we will find them in our garden, or if you don't have a garden, they're around the garden. They can be foraged from many places. And the reason why I want to talk about this is I've been, going over my garden searching for food to eat, greens and stuff. Like I just put a dinner in my sun oven, and it's made from carrots that I grew last year that I had stored in a soil. And I had potatoes, the last of the Mozarts, and they hold really well and they're still edible. And then some of the garlic's almost gone. So it's the tail end of that food. And it's the beginning of the garden coming in. I've been eating some of the young greens that are coming in. However, there's just not enough greens out there to really, be substantial. And so I've started looking around for other things to eat. And the dandelions, I'm starting to grow some of them in my garden. I'm leaving them, which I've never done before, ever. But I have a couple gigantic dandelions because one, I'm wanting the greens, and I've been preserving the flowers. I've been picking them off the green and dehydrating them in the sun oven and putting some of the flower petals in the freezer, and they'll be used for teas and tea blends. Some years I'll make dandelion honey, which is amazing. I still have a few jars from another year. I'd like to make some time for it. But the whole plant is so edible. And I also heard that the dandelion will bring up nutrients for the plants around it from deep down. And so I'm letting these guys grow for the first year ever. And so this got me thinking, this is actually a perennial vegetable. And it's actually a very important perennial vegetable. And I started looking at the other ones. So we're going to talk about that today because it's very timely. I think as the cost of food continues to go up, some of the food in the grocery stores, in the produce, it's just so expensive. I like to buy organic. and some of it is just it's getting to be out of reach, and who knows like what sort of nutrition it has. Is it really organic? And is it even really that good? I mean, some of it, sometimes it doesn't look very good. So I think we need to start supplementing a bit of our diet with some of the natural foods that are growing around us, that we know are organic, that are, we don't want to go out and harvest a bunch of greens or anything from beside a busy roadway or even a roadway. Like, we don't know what's been sprayed on that in the winter. So I just think that there's food around us, and it's going to be time soon that we're going to have to really start relying on that, especially during this time that's typically known as the hunger gap. And there's lots of the weeds, they're in the garden, and they're all around, like I'm seeing them. So I'm going to start with the dandelion, and basically it's really versatile for culinary use. And the young leaves are less bitter and can be eaten raw or in salads. And the older leaves can be blanched or sauteed to reduce their bitterness, similar to how you might prepare spinach or kale. And so the flowers, the petals can be added to salads, or they can be battered and fried. They can be used to be making dandelion wine. They can be used for herbal teas, for dandelion syrup. Like, there's a lot of uses for the flowers. And also the dandelion roots can be dried, roasted, and ground to make a caffeine-free coffee substitute, or they can be cooked, similar to carrots. And I don't think we have to get into how to grow them, because they grow everywhere. They're drought tolerant. They don't really need any watering unless it's very dry conditions. And the leaves can be harvested throughout the growing season. And the flowers are best picked when they are open and vibrant, typically in mid-spring. And I just found out, I was going out to harvest the flowers in the morning, and I did some research, and the one thing I found said to harvest them in the early afternoon. So I don't know if that's the best time, but that's now where I've started to do it. And it's actually a good time, because you're working in the garden in the morning and you need a break, and you come in and you pick the petals off the dandelion, the green part. So, and I know it has a name, and sorry, my mind right now is not thinking of it. So the roots are best harvested in the late fall after several frosts. And you can find dandelions all across Canada, growing in meadows, lawns, gardens, and even cracks in sidewalks. And you really want to make sure when you're harvesting, it's from an area that has not been sprayed. And so there are dandelion seeds, if anybody wants to buy any, that they can find. You can do some research and find them on some online seed stores. And so that basically, the leaves are best in early spring when they are tender and less bitter, but they can continue to be harvested the entire season. The flowers typically are good from April to May, and the roots can be harvested in late fall. And so, yeah, that's dandelions. And now we're going to get into purslane. And this is something that when I'm weeding in midsummer, usually, July, August, I'll see that and I'll always nibble on it or even when I'm in the garden, and I leave some of it growing, because it's really good. It'll keep you from getting heat stroke. That's one thing I heard. So I always eat it. And one year I even pickled it. I ate some of it on salads. I think it got left in the back of the fridge. And, but I remember it. I know it's very good. And I did do some things with it. I just don't think it all got eaten. And so the purslane, it's a very nutritious and versatile edible plant. And both the leaves and stems are succulent and crunchy, with a slightly lemony and peppery flavor. And they can be eaten raw in salads, added to sandwiches, or used in smoothies for a nutrient boost. And cooked, they work well in stir fries, soups, and stews. And the purslane seeds are also edible and can be used as a grain or ground into flour, though they are quite tiny, and harvesting them can be labor intensive. And so it's an easy to grow annual that thrives in poor, well-drained soil, and it loves heat. And it's a drought tolerant And the leaves and stems can be harvested continuously throughout the growing season by snipping them off, and this will encourage the plant to produce more. And it's commonly grown as a weed across Canada in garden beds, sidewalks, and other disturbed grounds. And it's often found in sunny locations where the soil is compacted and dry. And if anybody's looking for some seeds, they are available. I think if you can find some online seed companies that sell them, they'll be there. And yeah, it can be eaten throughout the growing season, which in Canada is generally from June until the first frost. And it's known for its high omega-3 fatty acid content. And this is a rarity among leafy green vegetables. So this makes it exceptionally beneficial for heart health and inflammation. And so it's very resilient. And this is an excellent choice to be adding some of that into our diet. And now we have lamb's quarters. And this is also known as wild spinach, and it has a mild, slightly nutty flavor. And the young leaves and shoots are the most tender and can be eaten raw in salads or sandwiches. They can also be steamed, sautéed, or added to dishes where spinach is used. And the seeds of the lamb quarters are edible and can be collected, rinsed, and used similar to quinoa, although they are much smaller and require more effort to harvest. And so it's an incredibly easy plant to grow. It'll pop up on its own as a garden weed, and it will self-sow itself from previous plants. And it really doesn't require any care. It is drought tolerant, and it will grow in poor soil without additional fertilization. And the leaves can be harvested throughout the growing season. However, for the best flavor and texture, you want to be picking your leaves young. And now you'll find it across Canada in fields, gardens, disturbed areas, and it will thrive in a variety of environments, but is mostly often seen in sunny or partially shaded areas with rich soil. And what I would recommend is when I started getting into edible weeds, I watched a lot of YouTube videos on it. There's a lot of great ones out there just to see what they look like. People will really get into depth. So you know what you're doing, because you just don't want to be going out there and, eating whatever, because not everything is edible. And I have a couple books on the subject also. So you really, do a little bit of work. It's not hard once you recognize them. Like, they're highly recognizable, and you'll start seeing them everywhere. And you can buy lamb's quarters on some online stores that specialize in wild edibles or heirloom varieties. So you can search for those. And the best time to harvest lamb's quarters is in the late spring or early summer when the leaves are young and tender. However, you can harvest them into the fall as long as the leaves remain in good condition. And it's a highly nutritious plant. And the leaves are packed with vitamin A, vitamin C, calcium, potassium, and iron, and it's a great substitute for spinach. And so that's a pretty valuable addition to your garden. And so what I'm starting to do now is I'm seeing some of these weeds, I'm leaving some of them to grow. Because I don't want them everywhere, but I do want a few just to, to have to eat in my salads until my salad fixings get all into full size. And so now we have the plantain, and I was picking plantain and chucking it in the compost pile, and I should have been throwing it in my salad bowl, because I didn't quite and I've heard about, and I know, I've looked at this before, but for some reason I just forgot about it. And so it's a versatile edible weed, and it has a slightly bitter taste. And the young leaves are more tender and less bitter. And it's really good for raw consumption in salads or sandwiches. And the older leaves can be cooked like spinach or added to soups, stews, and teas for their medicinal values. And the seeds of plantain can be harvested from the long, narrow spikes that shoot up from the center, and they can be used as a psyllium substitute, adding fiber to smoothies or baked goods. And plantain is a hardy perennial that grows well in poor compact soil, And there's really no need to plant it as it appears. It'll appear in lawns, gardens, and paths. And but if you do want to cultivate it deliberately, you can scatter the seeds in spring or fall directly into the prepared soil. And it requires minimal care. It's also drought tolerant, and it grows well in both full sun and partial shade. And so the leaves can be picked as needed throughout the spring and summer, and the plant will continue to produce new leaves if the old ones are harvested regularly. And it's across Canada, it's widespread. And so it is actually one of the first plants that will colonize bare and compacted soil. And there may be some online retailers that specialize in medicinal plants and native weeds if you want to find some to plant it. And so the plantain leaves are best eaten in the spring when they are young and tender, although they can be harvested into the early summer, and the leaves will become more tough and bitter as they mature. And the seeds will be usually harvested in late summer to early fall when the seed spikes dry out and turn brown. And it's not only edible, but it's also highly regarded for its medicinal properties, including its ability to soothe and heal skin wounds, bites, and stings when used topically. Its ease of growth and maintenance makes it a practical choice for anyone interested in incorporating more wild edibles from their garden into their diet. And something I believe I watched the one time, if you have a skin wound in the garden or a bad bite or sting, you can just chew on a bit of plantain and put it on the affected area. I remember that from somewhere. And now we have the chickweed, and it's a delicate and nutritious herb known for its mild, slightly grassy flavor. And the young leaves and tender stems are best used fresh in salads, sandwiches, or as a garnish. And they can be lightly cooked, similar to spinach, and are excellent in stir fries, omelets, or as an addition to soups. And the small white star-shaped flowers are also edible and have a decorative touch to salads and other dishes. And how to grow chickweed. It's an annual that it often self-seeds, but it can appear to act like a perennial in temperate climates. And you just sow the seed directly in the spring or late fall, and it can handle a wide range of conditions. And it's commonly growing throughout Canada. It's often found in gardens, lawns, and disturbed areas such as fields and roadside verges, but you don't want to collect from a roadside area. And it thrives in cool, moist environments and is often one of the first greens to appear in spring. And so you might be able to find those online also. And it's available to eat in the early spring throughout late spring, and again in the fall if the temperatures are cool enough, but it will die back in the heat of the summer, and it will return when the cool weather comes back. And so it's also very nutritious, and it has vitamin C, D, A, iron, calcium, and potassium, and it's a fantastic choice to be adding into our diet. And now we have some wild amaranth, and it's also known as pigweed, and it's very highly nutritious. And so the young leaves are tender and can be eaten raw in salads or sandwiches. They can be cooked like spinach, and the flavor is mild and slightly nutty. And the seeds of wild amaranth are small but packed with protein and can be collected, rinsed, and used similarly to quinoa. They can be cooked, popped like popcorn, or ground into flour. And the tender young stems can be cooked and eaten similarly to asparagus. And wild amaranth is an annual plant that is quite easy to cultivate. It will handle a variety of soil conditions. It's drought resistant, it grows rapidly, and it can grow in poor soil. And so the leaves can be harvested throughout the growing season, starting when the plants are young. And the seeds are harvested in late summer or fall when the flower heads have dried. And so you can find this across Canada also, growing in gardens as a weed, fields, and disturbed areas. And it thrives in full sun, but can also be found in areas with poor compacted soil. And there's a lot of online shops that sell different kinds of amaranth across Canada. And there's Uncle Dougie's amaranth also from Amaranth, BC, that if you want to get some to eat right away. And the best time to eat wild amaranth leaves is in the spring and early summer when they are most tender and flavorful. And the seeds can be harvested later in the season, typically late summer to early fall. And it's not only a source of leafy greens, but also provides grains. And so that's pretty good. And now we have shepherd's purse, and I was just pulling some of this guy out. And it's a plant that has a peppery flavor, and the young leaves can be eaten raw in salads where they add a sharp crest-like flavor. They can also be lightly cooked, and the seeds are small and peppery and can be used as a mustard substitute or added to dishes as a spice. And the young flower shoots and seed pods are also edible and can be added to salads or cooked lightly. And it is an annual or a biennial plant that is easy to grow. And the seeds can be sown directly in the soil in spring or late fall. And it prefers sun or partial shade. And it grows well in fertile, well-drained soil, but it can also thrive in poor soil. And it's relatively drought resistant. It doesn't really need much, and you can harvest as soon as they're large enough to use. And continuous harvesting will encourage new growth. And again, it's found across Canada in gardens, fields, and other disturbed soils. And it often appears in the cooler season and is less common during the summer months. And it's best harvested in the spring when the leaves are young and tender, and the leaves can become tough and more bitter as the plant matures, especially after it flowers. And the plant is most commonly available from late winter through late spring. And now we have clover. I've been pulling some of these guys out too. Here, I've been pulling out all this food and throwing it in the compost bin, and I should have been throwing it in a salad bowl, and I think many of us are doing this. And so clover is an edible plant with parts that can be consumed in various ways. The young clover leaves can be eaten raw in salads or cooked similar to spinach, and they have a mild, pleasant flavor. The flowers of clover are sweet and can be eaten raw, used as a garnish, or steeped in hot water to be making a refreshing tea. And they're also popular to be used in syrups or jellies. And you can also dry the flowers for teas in the winter. I think my neighbor does that. And the roots, although less commonly used, they can be cooked and eaten. So the whole clover plant is edible. And it is a perennial that is easy to grow, and it's sometimes used as a ground cover or a green manure crop. And the seeds can be sown directly into the soil in spring or fall. It prefers full sun to part shade, and it thrives in well-drained soil, but is quite adaptable. And it's a low-maintenance plant that fixes nitrogen into the soil. It improves soil fertility, and it requires occasional water in dry conditions, but generally doesn't need much care. And the leaves and flowers can be harvested throughout the growing season as needed, and the plant will continue to provide new growth. And again, it grows widely across Canada in meadows, lawns, and fields. And it's often planted intentionally in agriculture settings. And so you can find those seeds. There's many places that sell those seeds. You can even go into a garden center and find them. And so the leaves are best eaten when they're young and tender, typically in the spring and early summer. And the flowers will generally bloom from late spring through early fall, depending on the client and specific species. And so, yeah, there's some food security right there. And now cattails. These are a little bit of a different thing. I'm interested in them because I'm trying to get them to grow right now. There's a little water hole right near my place, and I was out there throwing seeds around. I forget to get the information on how to get the seeds going. I'll put it in the show notes below. But and I do offer the seeds for sale on my website. And so the cattails are remarkably versatile, and the roots or rhizomes can be harvested in the late fall to early spring, and they can be boiled or roasted. And I'm sorry, I have to go. I think the goats are up here. I will cut this off now. I'll leave the cattail down in the show notes below. And I look forward to talking to you next week, and I will see you in the garden. Thank you for joining me for this edition of In the Garden with Susan. I hope you enjoyed hearing all about the perennial weeds that are available to eat all around us, as we're looking to incorporate some fresh greens into our diet. And next week, we will get back into the perennial alliums and back into the perennial vegetables. And so I am also sorry, I apologize for the disruption. I will start to record this podcast at night when the goats are not running around. And you can find this podcast and others at Spotify, Radio Public, Podchaser. It's on my Rumble channel. It's on my YouTube channel. And it is at my website, www.gardenfairybotanicals.ca. And I look forward to talking with you next week when we get back into the alliums, the perennial alliums. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I will see you in the garden.